Welcome to Leadership Latum. Everyone knows that Venezuela is trying to free itself through elections from the tyranny of Nicolás Maduro, but not everyone knows the true heroine of this incredible feat. Today we will show you the incredible and brave story of María Corina Machado, one of the most emblematic figures in the fight for democracy in Venezuela. In this report, you will be able to learn about her personal, academic, and political life, but also her confrontation with Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro and its consequences. We will also review the incredible adversities that she is facing by being persecuted and harassed by a regime that tries by all means to annul her in this political battle, and yet, with all the weight of the power of the state, they can no longer stop her. We invite you to stay, as María Corina would say, until the end. María Corina Machado was born on October 7, 1967 in Caracas, Venezuela. She comes from an upper-class family with a strong business tradition. His father, Enrique Machado Zuluaga, was a prominent businessman who founded Siderúrgica del Turbio, while his mother, Corina Perisca de Machado, was a prominent athlete in the world of tennis, a psychologist by profession, and a woman known for her participation in sports activities, charity, and culture. María Corina has three sisters, Ana Cristina, Beatriz, and Catalina Machado, all involved in various business and professional activities. She is the mother of three children, Enrique, Alonso, and Corina Sosa Machado, the result of her young marriage to Ricardo Sosa Rodriguez. Currently, she is in a relationship with lawyer Gerardo Fernandez, a constitutionalist whom she met in one of his multiple campaigns. María Corina studied industrial engineering at the Andrés Bello Catholic University in Caracas, where she graduated in 1989. She has a specialization in finance from the Institute of Higher Administration Studies, IESA, a prestigious business school in Venezuela, and is a graduate of the program of World Leaders in Public Policy from Yale University in the United States. This solid academic background combined with her experience in business activity gave her a global and strategic vision, preparing her for the challenges that would come in her political and activism career. From a young age, María Corina showed a strong commitment to social activism. In 2002, she founded and chaired the non-governmental organization Súmate, which played a crucial role in the 2004 presidential recall referendum against Hugo Chavez. In 2010, she was elected deputy to the National Assembly for the state of Miranda, obtaining the highest number of votes among opposition candidates. In 2012, she ran in the opposition primary elections, and although she did not win, her participation consolidated her status as an opposition leader. In 2013, she founded the political movement Vente Venezuela, promoting democracy and human rights. María Corina's firm opposition to the governments of Chavez and Maduro cost her dearly. The so-called Bolivarian Revolution persecutes all of its opponents and directly attacked María Corina, especially because she had had the courage and arguments to confront Chavez himself in person, as she did in 2011. The regime has a large number of political prisoners. Now this situation is well known, but in 2014 the government was still hiding it, and María Corina was determined to expose the situation and ask the rest of the countries to intercede for her freedom. She had planned to present the case before the Organization of American States, and the government closed her access, but her tenacity led her to obtain a seat to join the OAS as alternate ambassador of Panama, and while in Venezuela there were important demonstrations against Maduro and a violent repression, Machado managed to denounce human rights violations and make international news. She herself is not imprisoned in El Helicoide because she achieved such a great degree of international visibility that it ended up turning her into a very powerful symbol for which there would be international demand. A brave woman who raises her empowered voice in defense of the human rights of those detained without justice and the victims murdered by police forces for the mere fact of protesting against the government. The fact of denouncing in the OAS what the government was trying to hide would cost her being accused by the regime's prosecutor of having committed treason to the homeland, and with that excuse, she was arbitrarily dismissed from her position as a representative of the nation. The government manages the law, Congress, judges, and all institutions at will, so it has a monopoly on force to violate any real right with total impunity. It is common to see Nicolás Maduro and his officials brandishing a small copy of the Constitution that they always carry in their pockets and use it to show the world that they are a democracy. Machado has been the subject of threats, physical attacks, and smear campaigns. In December 2014, having already stripped her of her parliamentary immunity, the mayor of Caracas and member of the ruling party showed at the end of May a series of emails in which she allegedly called for financing to annihilate Maduro, and therefore the Maduro government accused her of conspiring to assassinate the president, charges that she and the international community considered unfounded. As ridiculous as the accusation and the evidence may sound, we must keep in mind that the Maduro regime has a majority in Congress, has appointed all the judges, controls the Supreme Court of Justice, and also the National Electoral Council for what it does, and undoes it with total impudence without having a real division of powers. All institutions are used as instruments of persecution and intimidation. In Venezuela, the mere fact of questioning the government in something can land you in jail. The Maduro regime provides everything at each stage of the necessary process, from the accusation, the evidence, the confiscation of assets, and the appropriate exemplary sentence. Even the addicted media, since there is no free press in Venezuela, will end up validating everything so that public opinion continues to adopt as its own what the government defines. Restricting Maria Corina's freedom of movement is almost a matter of state. The government repeatedly uses the most diverse tactics to limit its capacity for political action. In May 2017, the government, through the National Institute of Civil Aeronautics, INACI, imposed a ban on the sale of air tickets on national airlines, which is why she is blocked at airports. Her passport has been retained, and she is constantly followed by security agents, intelligence. They even infiltrate their mobilizations, but with the advance of the networks, the protesters themselves film them and then recognize them for having appeared in some other video in which it is seen that they are government employees, and they publish both videos. The networks are full of these examples of situations created by the government to try to show a rejection of her figure. The intervention of her communications and the repeated raids on her home have been tools of intimidation, trying to create an environment of insecurity for her, her family, and her campaign collaborators. That is why Maria Corina, like thousands of Venezuelan mothers, has her children abroad, and she has to settle for seeing them very few times a year since she is not allowed to take flights. In a report to a Spanish media, she expressed that her children are the most important thing in her life and also the reason for her guilt and pain. I was the only mother who was not in my children's grades. I begged the judge to let me leave Venezuela and he wouldn't let me. I couldn't go, and they have been the most difficult days of my life. The personal cost that Maria Corina is paying when facing such a powerful tyranny is enormous. It cannot be expressed in her words. While Nicolás Maduro himself makes efforts to show himself to the world as a person concerned about rights, equalities, and the values of justice, he cynically runs a terrorist state that commits the worst crimes against all dissidents. And the collaborators and members of the Vente Venezuela campaign team have to walk in groups, take care of each other, and avoid being alone or repeating routines. The political police, the SIBIN, Bolivarian National Intelligence Service, first persecutes, then kidnaps, and makes the activists disappear for no reason, just for the fact of participating in the political events of Machado and the unitary candidate. The procedure of kidnapping activists and denying their arbitrary detention to lawyers and family members is what SIBIN agents practice. Subsequently, the terrorism court does not allow the appointment of private defense and assigns a public defender, probably a supporter of the regime itself, and thus the right to defense is violated, but disguised by a cloak of perverse legality. So far this year, there are 37 political and social leaders who have been detained by tyranny, Machado denounced in dialogue with international media. The majority are accused of the crimes of treason, conspiracy, legitimation, and association. To commit a crime, the harassment tactic used by the regime is not new. The candidate Henrique Capriles also suffered from it at the time. In all the tours they make in the electoral campaign, the hotels where the delegation stayed have been fined, under the same procedure disguised as tax inspection. As soon as Machado finishes his checkout, officials order the closure and apply severe fines. When they find out using espionage where the electoral committee is going, they anticipate and interrupt his public transportation service, order him to cut off the fuel supply to the region, and even water and electricity so that he cannot meet the minimum conditions for the call. For our followers who follow our reports and are not in Venezuela, this situation may seem unreal, but it is Maria Corina's daily life, a true daily ordeal. At her events in each town and city they visit, the leader can be seen without a platform, standing on a cart, because the providers of these services who have tried to contract with her Vente Venezuela party have already been arrested. However, despite her persecution, Maria Corina continues to maintain her commitment to constructive dialogue, the defense of human rights, and professing a message of building a true democracy among all. She is impressed to see her dialogue with the police themselves, members of the National Guard and rank-and-file officials who are sent to interrupt her journey. She expresses herself without losing her calm and trying to make them aware of the need for change and that they must be part of a new country that everyone needs. And to the despair of the government of Nicolás Maduro, despite so much intimidation, persecution, and harassment, the opposite effect is being achieved in the population. The situation is so unfair that ordinary Venezuelans themselves are realizing that the arms of the regime's power do not allow free competition, a clean campaign in the election, and that they persecute anyone who shows sympathy with the opposition. An example of this is the dramatic situation experienced by a humble roadside food stop called Pancho Grill that was closed for having served breakfast to María Corina and her team when they were touring the plain states of Venezuela. An hour after the delegation left, tax officials from CNIET came and saying that they were carrying out a procedure in the area. They proceeded to close that only location for 15 days, accused of tax evasion.
Bueno, aquí nos están cerrando el negocio porque vino María Corina Machado a visitarnos y pasó y nos compró 14 desayunos, gracias a Dios.
Y también han castigado a quienes la han atendido en el interior de Venezuela.
Cerraron la posada donde se quedaron el resto de los líderes políticos que acompañamos en la gira. Cerraron el restaurante que nos atendió.
They didn't count on the fact that one of the sister owners recorded the procedure with her cell phone, and that's when the miracle happened. Pancho Grill did not even have social networks, but they created one to spread the unfair situation, and the virality of the story meant that it now has more than 27,000 followers, and its business became a true success. People pass by on the road and stop to consume and buy as an act of solidarity and rebellion. The Parador became famous with the empanadas of freedom and now works twice as hard. María Corina, by taking her message to international forums, denouncing the situation in Venezuela, has achieved and obtained the support of global leaders and organizations. She has already participated in sessions of the European Parliament, the OAS, and the UN, and she does not miss the opportunity to speak with the few foreign press that has a work permit in Venezuela to show the hidden reality. The international media constantly ask her for notes, and thanks to the networks, she can inform the world what is happening in this unequal campaign for the presidency. María Corina, in addition to being a symbol of freedom, has become a phenomenon of faith, and her figure has an almost mystical effect on her followers, many of them so believing that they send her rosaries, altars, and candles in each place he travels. Everyone implores her for the return of her children and her relatives who had to leave for other countries due to the economy or political persecution. She, as a mother, shares the pain and feels it as her own. They don't have to explain her distressing absence to him. Her resilience and adaptability have been key virtues in becoming the most prominent voice of the entire opposition. Venezuela had several opposition leaders, but the lack of internal support and the wear and tear that the regime's harassment subjected them to was turning them off. In the case of María Corina, it seems that the more they attack her, the more she manages to gain strength, and the more they try to defame her, the more support she gets from people. In the midst of the worst adversity, she was able to build a network of support both nationally and internationally, working with other opposition leaders and non-governmental organizations. Her good relationship with President Milei of Argentina allowed him to save from jail 6 key members of her team for whom an arrest warrant had been issued and who are taking refuge in the Argentine embassy in Caracas. In a few days, Venezuela will be the center of everyone's attention. On July 28, 2024, María Corina Machado will face the current president Nicolás Maduro in elections. The candidate is Edmundo González Urrutia, but everyone votes for him at the request of the undisputed leader of the new Venezuela. Nicolás Maduro does not spare legal resources to rig the election to his convenience. He has to win, or he knows that he will have to flee the country to take refuge in an allied country, and that does not allow extradition. Russia, China, and Iran are the supposed options, but with the latest gold exploitation business assigned to Turkey and his previous visits, it is clear that it will be the refuge where the dictator will retreat thanks to the billions he stole from his people. If he wins, he will stay 6 more years, and a Venezuela with Maduro until 2032 is the nightmare of all of Latin America. In their desire to remain in power, they did everything within their power, from issuing an unfounded legal resolution to declare María Corina Machado disqualified, prohibiting her from competing, to later preventing the registration of Professor Karina Lloris, whom they designated as a replacement, and also to detain team members without cause. But María Corina already knows the regime's methodology, and while she announced Professor Lloris as her successor, capturing the attention of the National Electoral Commission, she played the card of registering the former diplomat without arousing suspicion and circumventing the CNE's traps. Thus, the unitary platform, the opposition political force led by María Corina, was able to nominate the candidacy of former diplomat Edmundo González Urrutia, because his candidate card had been previously accepted, since if the regime had warned of this possible maneuver, the accepted candidates would only be those that Maduro handpicked. María Corina had to transfer all of her support to a candidate who was practically unknown to Venezuelans, and it was the only way to circumvent a corrupt pre-electoral process, rigged and manipulated by a regime that seeks to perpetuate itself at any price. They manipulated the date, advancing the elections to favor the ruling party, adjusted institutional control to prevent the financing of the unitary platform, put pressure on all opposition supporters, used state resources to finance their own campaign, and abused power of all the resources of the government to condition the wills. Even so, part of the population fears that, at the last minute, faced with the imminent reality of losing power, the government will annul the card of the opposition candidate. As if all this panorama were not enough, the more than 5.2 million expatriates eligible to vote who reside abroad have been reporting irregularities and obstacles when registering to vote in the presidential elections for months. And since the foreign vote is known to have a strong anti-Chavista inclination, it is a crucial variable that the government intends to restrict as much as possible in the July 28 elections. Despite his disqualification, the impediments, the persecution and sabotage carried out by the government, María Corina appears unstoppable and is leading a very successful electoral campaign promoting change through the candidate Edmundo González Urrutia, mobilizing thousands of Venezuelans in each city he attends and expressing that voting for him will be the only way out of the tyranny of Nicolás Maduro. As she travels within Venezuela, Machado is subject to constant surveillance, is followed by unmarked vehicles, and is monitored by government intelligence agents on a permanent basis. Armed and unidentified people stalk her, sending information by cell phone and following her until she returns to her house. María Corina not only does she no longer fear them, but she confronts them and makes the situation public so that everyone knows how far Maduro and his regime go. Her communications are intercepted, and from time to time leaks of recordings and private messages appear that have been used by the government to discredit and publicly attack her. This espionage practice seeks to intimidate her and obtain information about her plans and contacts to send orders to the National Guard to intercept and detain her for any reason. With so much harassment and aggression, his main security shield is given by a very high public exposure that he promotes through social networks, reaching millions of Venezuelans who replicate his message through the networks in the hope of putting an end to 25 years of a Bolivarian revolution, which only benefited its corrupt officials. Polls indicate that González Urrutia would win by a large majority, and the reality of achieving historic change is getting closer, and that makes the entire regime very nervous, which is no longer finding a way to contain the growing popular clamor for his figure. María Corina's fight is not only a political battle, but a battle for the freedom and rights of all Venezuelans. Her leadership and bravery are a beacon of hope in 25 very dark years. It is so clear that in these elections freedom or tyranny is at stake, that no one demands a debate of candidates or asks about the economic plan or the politics of this or that sector. Everyone wants them to leave, and a few need to continue living under the current regime. María Corina Machado is without a doubt an emblematic figure who will be part of the pages of the country's history and will be recognized for the unwavering fight for democracy in Venezuela. Her life is marked by her firmness in democratic principles, her sacrificial personal dedication, her constant confrontation against repression, her resistance in the face of political persecution, and her vocation for dialogue to promote true democracy. For international audiences, Machado represents the courage and tenacity of those who fight for freedom and human rights in contexts of authoritarianism. For Venezuelans, it is a beacon of hope in which they place all the expectations of being a normal country, with families living in their land without having to escape to other countries to survive or not be persecuted. In these last days of the electoral campaign, it will leave a Venezuela ready to free itself through suffrage from the tyranny of Nicolás Maduro and the other accomplices of the looting of the country, who will be forced to accept defeat or stay in power, assuming the dictatorship that comes, being but no longer using the resource that they were elected to continue using the facade of democracy. The effects and consequences of María Corina's actions and campaign will be permanent news for a long time. The eyes of the world are on this process and on how the Venezuelan population is encouraged to end the great lie of 21st century socialism that only served to enrich a few at the expense of the suffering of all. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of María Corina Machado. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it so that more people know this incredible story of struggle and resistance. And please don't forget Venezuelans to vote. All of Latin America is waiting for them to achieve it. The effort is until the end.